Pragmata is a game that I went into with very little expectations. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was definitely excited that Capcom were working on a brand new IP for a change, but I sure didn't expect all that much from it. It looked like a pretty fun sci-fi shooter with unique premise and setting, with the idea of having this little kid riding around on your back the entire time seeming like a fun novelty. Then I actually played it. And while I was bang on with my expectations for the gameplay side of things, I definitely underestimated just how hard this story was gonna hit.
Who's that? I want to do my part. I know I can help.
Now, there's been a few times in games over the years where I've been brought to the brink of full-on man tears. One of the games to do this to me was Metal Gear Solid 3, another one was Titanfall 2. There were certain parts of the Darkness 1 and 2 that also did it, and now to add to that list, there's Pragmata.
Well, you best think on that yourself.
So, let's talk about why that is, shall we?
Take this!
Now, the story in Pragmata is set at some point in the future where you're playing as a guy named Hugh, last name Jas, with the old classic trope of a space station being mysteriously run down and needing repairs, this time being a station on the moon. With Hugh and his colleagues having been sent there to see what's happened and fix the place up.
Bring it in, Hugh.
Finding it eerily deserted with no other humans in sight, instead only with these automated robots controlled by the station's AI system named Asus.
Welcome to the cradle. Please state your request.
Very quickly, things go from weird to worse as Asus switches itself on and deems these guys a threat, with a robot that was just assisting them quickly turning hostile, attacking Hugh, with him then being separated from his crew.
Watch out! Captain!
He wakes up to find a little girl reviving him, who it turns out is actually an android that's been in sleep mode on the station for God knows how long.
You patched me up.
Who looks about as dangerous as a puppy wearing oven mitts, but has the very crucial ability to be able to hack into all these hostile robots, opening up their weak spots and allowing Hugh to actually damage them with his weapons.
He's a shooting to me.
Which goes on to obviously become a pretty cool mechanic with the game overall, as you end up then destroying an entire factory's worth of all these different robots. But it also becomes a pretty interesting dynamic, having what's essentially a little kid riding on your shoulders the entire time, helping you out. Eventually too, starting to grow with this whole father-daughter relationship, with both of them needing each other equally for different reasons, and Hugh quickly giving her the name Diana.
Diana?
Diana!
Where you really just start to appreciate having her hanging around, with her inquisitive nature always popping up in really charming ways.
This is how we say good job.
A big mechanic of the game is the shelter, which is like a safe room mixed with the bonfire mechanic from the Souls games, where you can save your progress and also upgrade your gear. And throughout the levels you find all of these Earth memory fragments, which can then be brought back to the shelter and activated for Diana to play around with. Find enough of these things and she'll even start giving you gifts in the form of little pictures she's drawn for you as well.
Ta-da!
And I don't know, like, maybe it's because I'm a dad myself with a daughter of my own on the way too, but even with my cold, dead, cynical heart, it was kind of hard to not find this stuff super adorable.
Diana, don't.
It's also kind of similar to the whole dynamic between Cooper and BT in Titanfall 2.
That's insane.
I'm incapable of insanity, Violet.
Hugh even teaches her how to high-five, which is a lot like Cooper teaching BT what a thumbs up means.
I'm counting on you, kiddo.
Roger that.
Plus, it's also reminiscent of the kind of stuff you'd see in a Hideo Kojima game, with all these minute little details. Like how she'll look up at Hugh during the upgrade screen, just enamored with the guy, leave the main menu idle long enough, and the two of them are even going to start having a conversation. And during combat, she'll cheer you on whenever you make it through a tough fight.
That was amazing, Hugh.
Like you.
There is a bit of tonal whiplash though, like for starters how this whole thing of Hugh losing his entire crew doesn't ever really get resolved. I mean, these guys disappear very early on and then it's like the game just forgets about it and it never comes up again. Sometimes Hugh's gonna mention them to Diana, talking about them warmly as if they're still alive and like they're just good mates, instead of lamenting the fact that the last time he saw them, they were getting sucked out of the goddamn airlock.
Oh no. Anyway, last week...
And I don't know, like, I'd just be a bit more serious about it if I didn't know the whereabouts of my mates. That's all I'm saying.
I guess you wouldn't know that, would you?
There's also this whole gee golly gosh vibe to the dialogue and the writing, where neither Hugh or Diana really seem to take this threat of these violent, murderous robots all that seriously, despite it being very clear that something terrible has happened here. The only other character they even really interact with is another android named 8, who looks a whole lot like Diana, and she's just completely monotone, giving you no real variety either.
How unfortunate.
Overall though, I'd say it's kind of like Death Stranding meets The Last of Us meets Dead Space, just with less corpse stomping. Visually too, it probably goes without saying, but Pragmata is a pretty damn good looking game at times.
I mean, it's alright, like...
It runs on the RE engine, which Capcom have used in the past with a lot of their titles, and it's definitely been put to good use here as well, with some really great environments that offers up some surprising variety. The whole premise of the station is that it's able to create all these holograms and constructs using a material called lunar filament, which is also something you're going to be collecting constantly to upgrade your gear.
That's a lot of bliss.
And it's also the explanation for why we're able to explore areas that look like New York City, along with forests and the sandy shores of some remote beach during a sunrise. All of the animations and the interactions between Hugh and Diana have very obviously been motion captured, which really helps convey that whole human element they're trying to go for. The boss fights are suitably epic as well, with these huge spectacles against these humongous robots that take up half the goddamn screen, and all have these large and over-the-top animations. And look, on that note too, I do have to also quickly thank Asus and Nvidia for getting me a copy of this game to begin with, and briefly touch on a couple of visual features this has. Like for starters, how Pragmata is another game to make heavy use of part tracing, where shadows are simulated in a way that's much closer to how light actually works in real life. This means you get softer, more detailed and lifelike shadows with more depth than standard rendering, and it's a small change, but it has a pretty huge and noticeable difference, allowing for things like light bouncing off different surfaces and real-time reflections, even taking into account objects outside of the player's field of view. And the results, I think, really speak for themselves, where you can see it put to best in areas like this one in the whole New York City simulation, where the way that all these different buildings are reflected in the water on the ground. The other thing this has is DLSS 4 with this all new multi-frame generation using ray reconstruction for amazing image quality and improved stability, along with the whole Nvidia Reflex low latency tech keeping responsiveness high. All this means is that you get the best possible visuals without also using up all of your resources, and it makes the whole thing run as smooth as butter, even when maxed out. I'm not too tech savvy with this stuff, but I just find it handy being able to turn it on and enjoy a smooth game, without the whole thing stuttering or chugging along, which for something like this that's all about fast-paced combat and timing is super important. Turning it on is easy as well. You just go into the options menu, you scroll down to the graphics, and then there it is. All for an end result that gives you a much more realistic and believable scene, really drawing you into this wild and weird world even more. So make sure to check out this new Asus ROG RTX 50 series so you can take full advantage of all these cool features. And yeah, once again, thanks to Asus and Nvidia for hooking me up and sponsoring this video. Right, so getting back on track, as for the actual gameplay, well, as soon as Diana hops on your back, she's gonna be planted there for the rest of the story. The way it works is that you walk into an area, robots are going to appear to attack you, and then you need to then hack into them to expose their weak spots, by guiding your cursor across this hacking grid until it reaches the end, dragging the cursor over multiple tiles to amplify the effect. Once you've done this, Diana's going to deal out some basic damage, but more importantly, their weak spots are going to be exposed for a few seconds, where you can then wail on them with your weapons until you're forced to repeat the process. That's pretty much it. I mean, different robots have different attack patterns and weak spots and all that stuff, but you're almost always having to start combat by exposing them first, or else it's going to be like trying to break down a steel door with a Frankfurt sausage. Where it starts to get more complex though is when you start unlocking different nodes. For instance, one of the early ones makes it so your weapons do increased damage temporarily. Another one that's arguably even more useful is the multi-hack node that exposes the weak spots of other robots nearby as well, so you don't have to manually do it for each of them. There's a confused node in there too, which causes robots to attack their allies, and then another one just outright freezes them and locks them in place. And all up, I think there's like a dozen or so of these in total, which all have different effects and uses. So it's not always just about shooting weak spots over and over. The catch though is that all of these are limited, and once they're gone, you're just relying on whatever the game decides to give you from that point on. Which is why I find it kind of weird as well how the game has a whole loadout system where when you're leaving the shelter, you can choose to set off with any of the weapons or hacking nodes you've unlocked, only for them to all be gone after the first couple of fights anyway. and you're constantly on the lookout for upgrade items and stashes of filament to spend back at the shelter and keep this stuff upgraded, which makes it kind of annoying when you run out of the ones you specifically put time and effort into upgrading. After you're a few hours into the game, you also unlock different suit modes, which comes into play after an enemy's weak spots are exposed, and this is where it starts to get even more complex. Now, one of these, for instance, is called Defense Mode, where going over those nodes amplifies the damage from Diana's hack even more. But I'd say the best one is the Heat Mode, which is where you run over these nodes that cause the robots to overheat and ultimately stall. And this one is pretty useful because it ties in with one of the best attacks, with this whole critical shot move, where you more or less get this free attack on an enemy that just does insane damage, usually finishing them off regardless of how much health they've got left. And playing around in Heat Mode lets you do this much faster. If this is all sounding confusing and a bit hard to follow, well, that's because it is, and even after a couple of hours, I was still trying to figure things out here, and decide what the best combos and hacking nodes were to be using. And that's not even taking into account all the various mods for Hue as well, with there being a good 24 there you can unlock. I mean, yeah, this shit is pretty deep, man.
What the fuck is this?
The thing is though, you're still having to hack more or less every single enemy, which does start to get a bit tedious. Especially when you got a whole bunch of them coming after you at once, where even just targeting a specific robot can be a challenge. You don't get any kind of time slowing effect or anything like that either during hacking, meaning you got to do all of this in real time. And enemies aren't exactly standing around twiddling their thumbs waiting for their turn to attack you either, so you got to be mindful of all these nearby hazards. Hue isn't all that mobile. I mean, he can dash in different directions, which is handy for avoiding attacks, but if you take a hit, you pretty much always get knocked on your ass. And given that he's wearing a huge ass suit, it takes him a little while there to get back up. Eventually, you can unlock an auto hack option, which uses up a bit of Diana's energy, and also handles the best hacking route automatically, which is often a far better choice in certain fights.
Man, that's fast.
But then the catch there is that this hack energy also runs off the same meter used for this super powered ability she gets called Overdrive, where she just BTFOs everyone in the area and stun locks them for a good 10 or so seconds. So I guess it's a bit of a catch-22 of whether or not you want to blow your meter on an easy auto hack or try and hold off for that bigger, more powerful press X to win move.
Leave it to me.
Either way though, it can still feel pretty clunky at times, and often it becomes a bit of a mess, where you have to think quickly on the spot and remember what hacks you've got equipped and what weak spots all these different enemies have and all that shit. I also found it really tricky to see some of these red tiles on the hacking board as well, due to my whole red-green color blindness, and yeah, that sure wasn't helping me either.
Can't see shit.
When it works though, it works, and there's some really satisfying hit feedback when you do finally land some hefty damage on an enemy with your weapons.
We did it.
Speaking of the weapons, there's actually a fair bit to talk about. You start off with Hue's grip gun, which looks, sounds, and feels a hell of a lot like the plasma cutter from Dead Space. Also starting off to be really piss weak and pathetic, and it taking forever to reload. But eventually after upgrading it, it becomes pretty decent and very effective. The other primary weapon you get is the carbine rifle, which is like a faster firing version of the grip gun, essentially, but doing way less damage and taking even longer to reload. Because now it's got to reload like 20 rounds instead of 5 or 6, which meant I just never really found myself using this thing all that much. It's these other secondary weapons though where it starts to get a bit interesting, with the Beta group on one side focused on dealing out heavy damage, and then a group on the other side focused more on tactics, with things like crowd control. On the damage side of things, you got the Shockwave and then the Piercer, with the Shockwave being a close range weapon similar to a shotgun or the Force gun from Dead Space. With the Piercer being more or less a railgun, charging up this super powerful and weirdly slowly moving projectile that does thousands of points of damage, and also pierces multiple enemies, you know, hence the name, dumbass. On the other side of things, there's the Riot Blaster, which is essentially a grenade launcher that's about as damaging as a Nerf gun, but does knock all the enemies on their ass for a few seconds, giving you some much needed breathing room. And hit a small group of enemies at once, and it's almost always going to knock them all over. The stasis gun is also really useful too, outright just locking them in place for a while, letting you hang back and hack from a distance or just deal damage safely. These weapons also have super slow reload times, and I guess the idea here is you're supposed to fire one, change to another, and then swap back to cancel out the reload. At least that's what worked best for me anyway.
it's over.
Not all of them are great though, like this photon laser for instance, which I found about as effective as harsh language.
Right on.
Weapon like the sticky bomb seems handy, which shrinks the hacking grid for enemies with each bomb that sticks to them. But I'd much rather just lock everyone down in one place and take my time with the stasis gun. Finally, there's like another slot for defense items, which is like a combination of the other groups. Now in this slot, you get the decoy, easily one of the best items in the game, which drops down this hologram thing that all the robots attack. Again, just basically giving you free reign for a bit. Along with these little drone things that can fly around and shoot at the enemies automatically. Like all the different hacks though, all of these weapons and items are also limited, with you only ever getting a few shots of ammo for each of them, where again you have to constantly rely on whatever the game doles out, which means that the game's really only as hard as your current loadout is. And it is worth mentioning that Pragmata can be a genuinely challenging game at times. First couple of levels are pretty easy, almost to the point of being misleading. I mean, there's a cinematic in there, for instance, where Hugh has a run-in with a new enemy type, which they portray as being super scary and dangerous, with him even outright running away from it like a little bitch.
It almost had us.
But then you can just instantly go back out the same door and easily kill this thing with little drama.
It almost had us.
So it definitely has you feeling very powerful early on there, only for it to then really ramp things up once you get to the third level, where enemies become far more numerous and tougher. And if you haven't got a good idea of the mechanics or the weapons you want to use here, you're kinda fucked. Lazily, it does just reuse the enemies a lot here too, where it's like the same robot you've already fought, only now they've given it a few new attacks and more health points, which can make certain areas and fights feel really spongy. And is it just me, or does it seem like the only way that Capcom really knows how to make combat in their games challenging is just to give enemies way too many health points? You can even see it recently in something like Resident Evil Requiem, where headshots start to lose their effectiveness the further you get into the game. And it's a similar issue here, where you can be doing everything properly or as close as it can get, and it still takes forever to kill something. Few times you can use the environment to dish out loads of damage and quickly kill these tougher robots, but these moments are pretty rare. And this wasn't just me trying to bum rush through the game either, like I was spending a lot of time here finding upgrades and making sure my gear was up to snuff. It also seems to briefly toy with the idea of these stationary turrets that can even block your hacking entirely, though thankfully this doesn't occur all that often. But yeah, like it does get to a point there where you think you should be feeling much more powerful, only the game just keeps finding ways to humble you. Oh yeah, speaking of, I also find the whole death system in this to be really tedious. So like I said before, it's got that whole Dark Souls thing where when you die, it respawns you back at a bonfire, which in Pragmata's case is the shelter.
Automatic repair. That's convenient.
Which means you not only have to load into the shelter, but then also run ahead to the loadout screen, pick your loadout, hop on a tram to fast travel back to where you died, before then running back to the area itself. And this isn't like the Souls games either, in the sense that you lose essence or XP or some other kind of resource that needs to be recovered. So why not just use basic checkpoints and respawn me near where I died? I don't know, man, this whole having to run back to the shelter thing just feels like it adds in needless downtime. You also take so much damage from enemy attacks here, to the point that I started to wonder why they even gave you a numerical health bar. I mean, if you got less than 500 health points, which is still roughly like a 30 health bar, you may as well just heal up fully, because it's probably going to prevent you from being killed instantly. And even then, like, your limited healing items only restore about a third or so as well. Occasionally, Diana will save you during combat with this slow motion sequence where you need to quickly complete a hack, but most of the time, death is sudden and swift. Now, it's not like the game is super crushing, and to be fair, most deaths here are usually perfectly justified. But yeah, like, I can't help feel that this whole respawn and running back gimmick doesn't quite fit a game like this overall. Where I think I really enjoyed myself here the most was with all the exploration, solving basic puzzles to find resources, along with going back to previous areas and using these new abilities to access areas I hadn't been before.
That's really cool.
And my only gripe there is how I wish they actually let you zoom in on the map directly, instead of just showing this generic icon that shows what area you're in as opposed to your specific position. I mean, what good is that, you know, when I'm navigating all these complex environments to try to find the one thing that I've missed? I mean, imagine in real life if you turned on Google Maps to get somewhere and it just showed you a map of the city you're in and said, "You are here." Yeah, thanks. There is actually too quite a fair bit of side content to get through here as well. Like for starters, back at the shelter, outside of all the upgrades themselves, you've got this whole bingo mechanic.
Oh yes, this is one of our more popular items.
Where you're constantly spending cabin coins to unlock new mods, packs, or even outfits. It's a really odd feature that almost feels like a battle pass or something.
Board complete. Wonderful.
Spending these coins and trying to make straight lines across the grid, unlocking things pretty much by chance, and having to complete a whole series of them all up. There's also all these so-called training levels, which are really just challenge maps, a whole bunch of optional stages with 3 usually very strict requirements, all to unlock further resources. And I do want to say that these kind of shit me up the wall, because while some of them are piss easy and able to be blitzed in 1 or 2 attempts, there's a lot of them here which are very clearly designed to be replayed over and over until you master them. Where it's not so much about skill as it is just memorizing specific patterns. And I don't know, man, like there's just not enough time in the day to spend it replaying stuff like this over and over. I mean, I'd rather put out a cigarette with my asshole.
Impressive, Snake.
Then finally, aside from all the collectible stuff in the levels, there's these so-called red zones, which are tougher combat arenas that unlock further gear, with there also being like a dozen or so of these all up too. So for completionists, there's very little to whinge about.
It's over.
And that's not even taking into account New Game Plus mode, along with the extra higher difficulty modes you unlock as well. Overall though, it wasn't the gameplay that kept me hooked here with Pragmata. I mean, it was fine, sure, but the main thing that kept me going was the ongoing story with Diana and Hugh. Early on, the guy promises that no matter what, he'll make sure she makes it to Earth so she can see what life is like, with her only idea of what the planet is like coming from artificial memories and other tidbits of information. And where this all goes is really the heart and soul of the whole experience, not from the 50th combat encounter against the same robots you fought a bazillion times, but from one man's journey to ensure that this cutesy little android is able to know some semblance of happiness outside of this dark and depressing hostile environment on the station. And I really was shocked at how many times Pragmata is able to gut punch you right in the feels, like really sucker punch you and catch you off guard. I mean, there's story beats here and there, which I'm not going to spoil, but I'll just say they do their job and elicit the kind of emotional response they're going for. You know what I mean? That kind of response where you're suddenly looking around the room for that invisible person who's started cutting onions.
Then I can go see your house and the ocean and real trees.
You bet.
I mean, that's what people are going to be talking about here long after the game ends, and you know what? That's totally fine. I think we sometimes get so used to these elaborate 40-hour-long open-world games with bazillions of missions and skills and classes and all that shit that we forget that sometimes all you really need is a well-told story about a dude lugging himself around a hostile space station with a sweet, murderous little android child on his back.
Take this!